The Russian economy has hit a recession, kind of, with the Kremlin simultaneously having its cash well run dry. This would seem to have an even worse effect on recruitment rates, seeing as the Russian Ministry of Defense mans its trenches on voluntary contracts. But then you start to think about it, and the economics of the situation are unclear. So, on today's Geopolitics HelpLINE, we try to get to the bottom of the situation. Russia has two simultaneous factors at play. One, its economy has hit a recession. And two, because supply is dwindling, the cost of recruits has gone up. Will the first factor begin to counteract the second? I like this question a lot because it plays on a whole bunch of subtle economic factors that show a deep understanding of how military economics work. And the answer has an unexpected twist, because the first factor should counteract the second under normal circumstances. But Russia is anything but normal. Let me rewind and clarify what is happening with this question's premise. Russia is indeed entering a recession. The first quarter GDP figures estimated the Russian economy as 0.5% smaller than the first quarter of 2025. Usually, the definition that US economists use for a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of GDP loss, but whatever. The economy is getting smaller in Russia. Now, under normal circumstances, we might expect this to lead to the pool of Russian recruits expanding. The choice those folks are making is between staying in the regular economy and exiting to take a Ministry of Defense contract. The more attractive opportunities in the regular economy look, the fewer individuals would want to leave for the MOD. Recessions typically result in fewer employment opportunities and lower wages for ordinary workers, making it tempting to conclude that, holding fixed the military contract's wage, a ton of new people might be shipping out to Ukraine. It would seem to be a silver lining for the Kremlin in a report filled with a bunch of red flags. That goes double given indications that Russia is now losing soldiers at a faster rate than it can replenish them. However, as a demotivational poster once warned me, every cloud has a silver lining, but tens of thousands of people die each year to lightning strikes. Thus, we should examine what exactly is happening with the recession. Well, the recession is actually a combination of many factors. Remember that this covers quarter 1. Oil prices were slumped through February 27th, so about 2/3 of the period is getting dinged there. The remaining third covers the post-Iran war rise in oil prices, though they took a bit to climb to their peak. Ukraine's infrastructure strikes ramped up over the period, so the benefit there was not as great as it may first appear. Another part is that the Fortress Russia accounts seem to have run dry, so the federal government is no longer tapping into them, or at least not as much, to supplement traditional sources of spending. This has led to lower investment in new weapons factories, which was the primary driver of GDP growth at the start of the invasion. To make up for some of those lost funds, Russia has increased taxes. Perhaps your Econ 101 training will remind you that higher taxes create larger deadweight loss, which is essentially wealth that vanished from the country. Then there is Russia's persistent high inflation and low investment in the civilian economy. It is just hard to make a profit if you have to take out debt to make money in the future, when you also have to absorb crippling interest payments in the meantime. Okay, now that we know what is happening, we can start to identify the winners and losers in the Russian economy, and from that knowledge base, we can address the original question. I would describe the military sector as fine. It is not the same kind of growth sector that it once was, but it remains a healthy source of productivity for Russia. Well, not healthy in the sense that it is creating value for the world, but you know what I mean. It also helps that the sector is in no danger of defaulting, because the government will prop it up under all circumstances. The downside is that such protection creates an extreme moral hazard problem, but that is the Kremlin's headache to deal with. The civilian sector, on the other hand, is an absolute mess. If businesses are not building due to the high interest rates, then construction companies get buried. The maintenance that companies have put off for 4 years now has reached the point where it is pinching production across the board. The effects of higher productivity workers fleeing the country after the fall 2022 mobilization also still linger. Bankruptcies are accelerating, and the government is less inclined to bail out the sector compared to military manufacturers. High labor costs continue to drag down profits for the companies that remain. And that is the perfect segue to the last group, the workers. They are doing well, for the most part. War contracts raised wages for everyone. So did increasing labor demand in factories to produce weapons. So did reducing the supply of labor by pulling a lump of individuals to the front lines, with many of them staying there, others staying there permanently for a different reason, and yet others returning home in no physical shape to return to work. Unemployment rates in the country remain very low, arguably at the full employment level. I know that it seems counterintuitive, but a 0.0% unemployment is not good. It means that the market is illiquid, and workers are staying at their current jobs in fear of being unable to find better opportunities. You want some of what is called frictional unemployment, where workers leave their jobs for short periods as they transition to a new and better employer. As I said, as a downside for civilian employers, wages are elevated. That is an upside for workers, of course, and it is a product of all of those structural factors that we just went through. The only real problem is the aforementioned rise in private sector bankruptcies. Unlike wages, this is not zero-sum. If an employer vanishes, so too do all of the corresponding jobs. Perhaps worse, the workers may go unpaid for their labor for the last few weeks of their time at the job. This creates some systemic risk due to private citizen debt defaults, but it is not that far away from the ordinary level of risk outside of a war. As long as unemployment remains low, these cases will be few and short-lived, as workers quickly find new jobs and resolve their economic problems on their own. So, back to the original question. The recession as of now will not be impacting workers' quality of life. The Kremlin will not soon have a lump of recruits in desperate need of money, who then accept Ministry of Defense contracts at poverty wages. It is hard to find any silver linings here for the Kremlin. Now, that could change. The point of vulnerability is civilian production. If that sector fully collapses, hiring in the war sector will not make up the difference. Then you could get a spiral effect, where unemployment decreases demand for civilian products, leading to more bankruptcies, leading to more unemployment, and so forth. Central banks have a bag of tricks to try to smooth over these problems. However, that bag is not bottomless, and the Kremlin has kept reaching into it over the last 4 years. Indeed, the usual solution to a recession is for a government to grease the wheels of the economy by increasing spending. But the Kremlin has increased spending for years now when the economy was otherwise healthy. That has created the current mess, and it is a mess that the standard solution cannot fix. Hence, you might say that the situation overall is precarious. But that should also come with the caveat that Russia is not even in a technical recession at the moment, and depending on what happens with oil prices and Ukraine's kinetic sanctions for the next month and a half, we might see GDP growth in Q2. Zooming out for a final note, I would more generally point out that the public perception in the West is that the fall of Putin is most likely to come from protesters pulling him out of the Kremlin. But that is not the main point of vulnerability right now. Rather, the invasion of Ukraine has been a complicated system that takes money from Russian oligarchs, reroutes it to average Russian citizens, moves a front line, and kills a bunch of Ukrainians in the process. The main point of vulnerability right now is oligarchs getting tired of getting played. Meanwhile, I ain't playing with these 2 books about the war. Both are great. Check the video description for more information about them. And if you enjoyed today's video, then please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.